Welcome to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and I have a guest today, Brighton Bridges. Welcome, Brighton.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Oh
for
my
having
gosh.
me.
So I don't often do this where we get to share space together. So this is a very lucky thing. I've been on your podcast called Brighten Your Day. A little play on words, kind of like my Crafting a Meaningful Life by Mary Crafts. And you're here visiting your parents. And so we got to do this. Like, we didn't have to do remote. You came all the way up here and we got to do this.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much for having me.
I love it. So I will include the link at the end of this show for Brighton's podcast. If you want to follow her and learn how to brighten your day. Isn't that a nice play on words? I love that. But one of the things that all of you might be wondering is, first of all, there's 50 years difference between us. Almost, not 48 years difference between us. And so what could we possibly share in common? And what would we even have in common enough to talk about? I think that's one of the things you're going to see. Brighton, as I talked with you and on your podcast, that's one of the things that I left with was, I don't have any worries of this next generation.
Wow.
Because you really give me hope for what's going on in the future. So let's start with that. Let's talk about a little bit about who you are previously to now.
Okay.
Like a little bit about growing up and that kind of thing. And then I want to know what in the world prompted a 23-year-old, recently married woman, doesn't she just look like she could just be a beach bum the rest of her life? What prompted you to kind of shift and want to do something different? So let's go with that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I can absolutely go back. Growing up, I was trying to think about that. Like, who was I? What was I like? Because I think in terms of me exploring myself, which I think is like the 20s era, is just self-exploration. I really was like, who was I when I was little? What did I like? I was a tomboy. I loved going outside. I was barefoot all the time. I loved learning. I loved talking to people. And with that, I was like, all of the things now that I'm interested in have come from self-exploration, have come from what did I like when I was a child type of thing. So I thought that was so interesting. Like, everything I loved truly was in those childlike moments. Growing up, I think I loved playing soccer so much. I seriously was like a tomboy. Like, if you saw pictures, like, my parents were like, okay, like.
She didn't look like a tomboy, I can say.
Yeah. No, but like, oh my gosh, always had like grass stained knees or like ripped clothes, like always playing with the boys, like, the whole nine.
I love that.
I loved it so much. And then going to junior high, I think, and I don't know how deep you want me to get into this, so it's totally fine. I'm completely comfortable talking about this.
This is your podcast, girl.
Okay.
So wherever you want to go.
Yeah. I think junior high, hard for anybody.
Yeah.
No matter what.
I wouldn't go back and repeat that for anything.
Oh my gosh, no. Like, it was a time where I think 7th grade was fine. Like, 7th grade, I don't even know. I don't even remember that year, to be completely honest with you. And then 8th grade hit, and it was kind of when things shifted. I had like recently broke my wrist, and I was goalie playing soccer, so that was like an identity kind of crisis for me. Like, I'd broken my wrist, I didn't know where I was, like what I was doing, what I was interested in, and I kind of fell into like this friend group, like the one friend group that you don't want to fall into type of a thing, 8th grade to 9th grade. And during that time, I got really depressed. Really depressed. And thinking back now, it's like all of my habits were not great. Like, I was staying in my room, I wasn't outside anymore, like all the things that I love. And going back actually to when I was a child, a big thing for me has always been the sun. Okay, like, I love the sun, which is funny because living in Utah, the winter is so brutal for me. I'm like, oh, that's why I like Florida. I love it so much. But yeah, like thinking back to that time, I was like, I wasn't going outside, which if you guys ever watch my podcast, like that's a huge thing. I'm always out in nature.
You are always
Yeah.
out. You're at the beach. You're in the sun always.
Always. And I think I learned that early on, like, oh, yes, I loved soccer, but it was because I'm out in the sunshine. Like I'm out connecting with friends, like exerting my body, moving all the things, and I wasn't doing that. And I think during that time, like, it just kind of compounded, like, I don't want to necessarily say I was like bullied, but yeah, like it was a pretty hard time. And
well, I think that's interesting because so many young girls and boys, this is not a exclusive to female thing.
Absolutely.
That in that transition time in junior high, that suddenly things begin to affect you differently. And where you were a child and living this wonderful, happy life, suddenly you're shifting.
Yeah.
And there's new friend groups. That absolutely what happened to you. What do you think was the impetus to have you shift friend groups?
That's actually a really good question. I think, if I'm being honest here, it was a boy.
Okay.
Like it was a boy, he had friends, and I was just like, oh, like, I want to be like them type of a thing. I didn't have my own I've always had a moral compass. Actually, when I was like really little, I would like stand up to people, and I would like, my dad always thought I was going to be a lawyer because of that. Still thinks I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm like, okay.
You still could be.
I still could be, but he always thought that because I've always had a strong moral compass ever since I was little. But during that time, I think I had learned really hard lessons during that time because I had lost myself in the relationship and in the friendships, and I wanted to be like them so bad, and I wanted to be accepted. I think that's like a normal thing for it's men and normal. Women, boys and girls.
And it doesn't just happen when you're in junior high.
Absolutely.
It continues on. I know women who are my age.
Absolutely.
But that is still their thing. They just want to be accepted.
Yeah. And I still feel that, and I think that's a good thing to say. Like, anything I struggled with then, it's not like I'm completely over it for the rest of my life, like I think life has ebbs and flows of depression, anxiety, all of those things. And I will say very briefly, but I had an attempt on my life. I tried to commit suicide. I don't know if you know that or not.
I didn't.
And I was almost going to warn you beforehand, but it doesn't affect me, like I feel like I can say that, I can own it, and yet it's not like, it doesn't like consume me. It's not my story, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I might reframe that a bit for you.
Please.
That it will always be part of your story. But whether or not you choose to remain a victim of that.
Yes.
Or a victor. I have suicide attempts in my first year of college. And I remained a victim of that story for a long time. And now I'm not. I'm a victor. So but it's still part of my story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think coming up here explaining that to my mom, like, because she was just like, only share what you feel comfortable sharing. Totally, completely understandable. But I think it's almost been so long that it would almost be a disservice to not at least share that that's a part of my story, to then see like, okay, like she had such a hard time during those times. Like she had to go to the hospital. She had to like do all these things. And yet that wasn't the end, and yet that there's so much more to be lived. And I think to that, I'll say like, coming up here, I realized I'm genuinely grateful that I went through really hard things really early, because now I feel like I've learned more than most people my age. Like the hard things really molded me into the person that I am today. And I think, to wrap it all together with your question of this upcoming generation, one, I know how it feels to still be lost in my 20s. Like, absolutely. And two, I also think that I've had a experience and a time that many people haven't had. And so I think I've learned the tools to be able to help my generation. I think that's why my focus is on my demographic. Like, even with my podcast, mostly it's like I'm coming to wiser people that are almost teaching me, and then in turn teaching my audience like how to find yourself, how to be resilient, how to do all these things that I'm still trying to learn myself. And I think most podcasts, which I love this, most podcasts are coming from the other angle of like, I have learned and grown so many things through my field of expertise or through my life experiences. Like, let me share, let me teach you what I think. And I think that's so needed. But I just thought like, I've never necessarily seen like the other side where it's like, yeah, like teach me so then you can like teach other people like your knowledge, you know? So yeah.
I definitely feel that even though at my age, Brighton, that when I have people on,
yes,
I learn so much from them. They have so many great things. Just something, the way that someone will say something, the concept may not be new to me, but the way to think about it. I learn stuff every single week on my podcast for sure. But I love this idea that as you went through those things, first of all, let me just say that your gift of vulnerability, of being willing to share those things, in the end will be the most healing piece for you.
Yeah.
It will be the gift that will heal you and will also allow others to be healed along with you, because every single person can say, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I've done that. Do you know what I mean?
And I didn't even know about, exactly. Yeah. And I think I had only previously once shared it in a post. Like I've never kind of come out on like a podcast or anything like that to share it. But it was insane, for lack of a better word. It was crazy how many people, old and young, that like messaged me. Were like, I'm still going through that. Like older people, I just never, I almost thought like, since I had experienced it when I was young, like that's usually what happens. And it's yet you forget that no matter the age, no matter what you look like, no matter anything, like you could still be struggling with that. And I think also with that, like the happiest people, I don't want to say usually struggle the most, but it is shocking how many people you would have never expected to be struggling, like that are really struggling. And I actually recently had a friend last December that took her life, and genuinely from the outside, she had everything going for her. Like she truly, like she had her own business. It was doing great. She was, it was just something that I had known in the past, and yet it hit me at a deeper level. Like I really need to be connecting to people and loving people, because you just absolutely have no idea.
You never know. And I think that that's one thing that I probably learned, and I didn't learn. I just am so happy you learned this at this age. I was really in my 50s when I finally let down my barriers and became vulnerable and began to share. And it was that very act of sharing it that began my healing process.
Yeah.
And can you imagine how many women came to me in their 50s and said, my husband also beats me. I don't know how to leave my marriage. I don't have an income. I don't know how to. And so we each have our things that we're able to lift others by sharing our own struggles.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, now it's like I'm so focused on kind of self-exploration. Like I said in the past, I actually wanted to say this quote. It's by Emily Dickinson, and it's, I'm out with lanterns every day looking for myself. And I think that's like a perfect summary, especially in your 20s, to just be like, this is what I'm doing, and almost like, join me, you know, like join me, no matter how old or young you are. Like, I think that's one of the most important things you could ever do, is explore yourself, explore your inner child, explore why you like these things, why you don't like these things, why you like these people. Like, I just don't think a lot of people actually do that, you know? Like, I think we live in autopilot a lot of the time, and I've learned a lot from kind of taking the time to learn about myself.
Yeah, and I think there is the autopilot, but the autopilot, I think people it's their go-to
Yeah.
because of fear. They don't know about the unknown, and they're afraid to venture this direction. And so let's just stay here with what I know. Let's just stay on autopilot. That's one of the things I think I admire most about you, Brighton, is that hasn't been your MO. It was not hiding. It was not just, well, I'm just going to stay on autopilot and I'm better now, so let's just go through the rhythms of life. That analogy, that quote, I've never heard that quote before, and I love it.
Yeah.
Now tell it to me again.
I am out with lanterns looking for myself, or I am out with lanterns every day looking for myself. One of the two.
That visual, does not that visual just come up and grab a hold of you? I can just
it really
see
does.
you holding these lanterns just going through life and looking. And the only way we can look is, of course, to let go of the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. And I think too, like I said, it's not like I'm fully healed. I think what I've realized the most from that time in my life, and then I had another time when I lived in Texas that was also really hard. Like I was just newly married. I moved away from all my friends and family, like very self-isolating experience. And I think during that time, it wasn't necessarily like depression, but that's when I started getting like panic attacks, like out of nowhere. And nothing was necessarily happening, but it was like my body speaking, like something is off, or I don't know, you're not like tuning into yourself. And I think I realized that like, again, like, oh, okay, I'm not forever fully healed. Like I'm gonna always have to be kind of exploring that side, being like, why am I having panic attacks right now? Or not even necessarily why, because sitting in the why and spinning can be a whole other thing. And I definitely have done that before, but just acknowledging that that's what's happening and like moving with it and moving through it instead of just living in that forever. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Are you to the point yet, Brighton, when you can look back on some of those experiences and find gratitude?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even with the recent panic attacks, like 2 years ago, I was literally thinking this. 2 years ago, I would not have been able to come here and sit down with you. And of course, I was still feeling nervous, like, especially when we first started. And you had said that on my own podcast, like, because we talked about fear in depth. And of course, like, I'm still nervous, but like, there's a difference there. And I think, if I can say a book, that there's 2 books that really, really helped me during like the depths of, and I truly mean like daily panic attacks. Like I don't take that word lightly whatsoever. But the 2 books are The Untethered Soul.
Oh, that's an incredible book.
I can't remember the author.
Yeah, it's eluding me this moment, but that's an incredible book. Incredible
book for anyone, especially with anxious thoughts. And like, if you feel like you can't, it was the first time that I realized that my thoughts are my thoughts and I don't have to attach myself to that thought. Like, a big thing for me was I hated traveling, which is so hilarious because, my whole family lives across the country from me. Yeah. Like, I have to travel. Yeah. And on top of that, with my podcast, my dream is to be flown out and to meet people. Like, so anyways, it's just funny. Like, I have to do these things. And I was listening to that book on the plane, and it was talking about this analogy of, I think, a ball that you had, and it that's like, I could be wrong, but I remember it saying like, that's like your thoughts, and you could be holding on to that ball, but you don't have to. You can let that ball go. Like, you don't have to just, what if the plane crashes, or what, all these things. And it was the first time I realized, like, I am this being, I am this thing that is separate from my thoughts. And it talks like your thoughts are almost like your roommate, your annoying roommate. There's that voice in your head, but you don't have to listen. Like, you can acknowledge that they exist, but you don't have to be there. And then the second book is A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
Oh, yes.
I love that book.
That's a great book too.
So good. love. So those are the 2 that, like, I will say, in kind of like the depths of everything. A Return to Love was more an exploration on my spirituality. because I grew up Mormon or LDS, and I love that religion. Nothing against that at all, but I think I just went along my own way of like, okay, what do I believe in? What do I feel is true in
personal
me?
Expression.
Yeah. And I think that book is a great one to just understand, like, everything is love. Like, nothing else matters but love. So I'm glad you know both of those books.
And just from the time we spent on my podcast or your podcast, I'm sure you know that, and I know my listeners know that love is really the key.
Yeah.
And to have spent so much of my life in the corporate world and having that be such a taboo word.
Yeah.
When you were, and even now when I do motivational speaking, a lot of people feel uncomfortable if I use that word in the middle of a corporate setting or to a business group. I'm like, well, there's only two basic emotions, and one is fear and one is love.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can talk to you about the imposter syndrome. That's fear. And I can talk to you about being your very best self, and that's love. Or we can actually just call a spade and talk about those emotions.
I love that. I actually, now that you put those together, I totally see that that's like fear is imposter syndrome. I never actually thought about that before, which is, I mean, me, being 23, starting my own podcast, trying to ask people like you that I admire so much, like, can you be on my podcast?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, I think I do kind of experience that, which is, that's a cool framing to be like, no, that's coming from a place of fear instead of loving myself and knowing that I have something to share.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people feel that way sometimes, like that they have something to share. And I think everybody does, but we just get so jumbled and not wanting to use our voice anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I speak enough publicly that sometimes I think just before I go on stage, why am I doing this? I don't have to do this. I'm not getting paid that much. I could just go home.
Yeah.
Because you get a little anxious even now.
Oh, yeah.
But then I'm like, I got this. I've done this hundreds of times. What is the deal here? And so I really try and narrow in on what is the deal today that is coming up for me. And I'm usually able to kind of zero in. Like, for example, oh, well, that's because all of this group are women who are my age. They're my equals.
That makes sense.
And so when I talk to younger people, it's not a problem because I know.
Yeah, you're like, I know what I'm talking about.
But I'm afraid somebody's going to stand up and say, oh, that isn't right.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a group of men. And I'm like, what I have to say, they're not even interested in.
Yeah.
They will see me as less than.
Which is what you said coming to my podcast, like, what do a bunch of 20-year-olds, like, what do I have to say? And it's like, and I think this is beautiful because I don't think a lot of 20-year-olds go out anymore and try and this is kind of a separate topic, but even try and like network anymore. I was talking about that with my mom, like, and especially with people older than them. I don't think that's a thing. And I'm actually making this YouTube video right now titled, I Investigated the Effects of Social Media. And I want to go around and like literally go to UVU campus and ask like, what, how many apps do you use a day, or what social media apps do you use? Like, how do you feel when you get off them? All those things. And my, I guess, hypothesis is like, we are very disconnected. Very, very disconnected. And my parents go to networking events all the time. And I think Utah is also very like interconnected that way. And I find myself being like, Mom, like, you should invite me because no one my age is doing something like that. Like, and I think that's like the next generation of even entrepreneurs and anything even in the business space, but it's all online, and online is an incredible tool. But even me being online, I'm realizing like, oh, I love in-person things. Yeah. Like, I love being able to...
That's a gift for you that you feel that way because so many people don't now.
Yeah. And I think I went through that. And especially when I lived in Texas and I was feeling like so anxious, but I realized like, Oh, I am happier when I'm around people, even if, like, at first I'm extremely nervous. Like, and
Right.
I think, not to get into it, but COVID and lockdowns, all those things, like, people have become
They
so,
all influenced us.
yeah, so accustomed to just, or comfortable to just be by themselves or being in their house. And yeah, like I said, like, Zoom and everything's incredible, but I think we're losing that art of being in person and networking. Not necessarily Utah, because Utah has so many events, but
But I think you're absolutely right. As you made this decision to shift your path of where you were going and the things that you had experienced, and you decided, I'm going to craft something different. Did you know how you were going to craft it? Did you set a plan? How did you discover this path for yourself?
that's a great question.
Oh, thank you. I love to ask great questions.
It really is, though. Which I'm gonna give another book. I'm literally only halfway through it, and yet this is one of the best books, especially if you're in your 20s, just because, it's helped me the most with the things that I'm trying to decide. It's called Mastery by Robert Greene. And
I have not read that.
amazing. I'm only
Okay.
halfway through and I'm
Okay.
like, whoa. But to summarize the idea, really, a lot of what he talks about is exploration. And it's given to a lot of college students once they graduate. And it's basically like a step-by-step, like, you need to see how you were as a child, which is why I brought that up, because I've been thinking a lot. And those can kind of give kind of glimmers to what your path is, what your natural path is, what your gifts are, what your talents are, kind of your divine uniqueness. A lot of them are within your childhood.
Yeah.
And then it goes through, and I'm not even done with it, but I think the framework of that is really what's helped me. And I think, one, I'm happiest when I'm outside, and that's how I was when I was little.
And you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two, this is what's interesting. I think with podcasting, going back to social media, I have found, because I was kind of in that weird age where, like, I grew up when I was little, I didn't have an iPad. Like, I you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was kind of the last generation that really actually, like, went outside and played and did make-believe and all those things. But then, like, kind of in my junior high years is when, like, all of those social media companies were introduced.
Yeah, I'm very much aware of
Yeah.
that. And I didn't know if you had put those two together.
Yes. And that's why I'm really hitting hard on social media right now. But I think with that, like, that's kind of where I lost myself for a second. So then to go back and look at my childhood and then continue forward. But that's one piece of the puzzle. What I learned also is that I love deep connections. I've never been someone that, I feel like I have a lot of peers, but I love getting really, like, deep with my friends. Like, and I think that's why I kind of turned to podcasting, because at first I'm like, oh, maybe I just want to make YouTube videos and do all these things, and those are great, but I think the conversation is where I really thrive, and I really love that. This is all to say, like, I could change tomorrow, I could go back to college and I could do all these things, and I don't think I'm necessarily set in stone, but I think after any of these conversations, I look for that feeling within myself. How do I feel after I'm doing that? And every time after a podcast, I'm like, yes, I'm putting good things into the world. This is a tangent. Last thing, I think, especially for people my age, we're incredibly focused on ourselves, rightfully so. We're trying to figure everything out. And because of that, I've almost become very selfish with my thoughts. Like, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And yet, and this is just one form of it, and yet making a podcast, talking to the people, and almost viewing it as like an offering to the world. And you can do this in any way. You can do this by serving in the community. You can do this by making art for people. But shifting your focus from yourself to what are my talents and how can I use them and how can I put them into the world to make the world really a better place,
Right.
I think has made me the most happy, and it's where I've found my path the easiest. That was long.
No, I love that. And that's really kind of exactly what I was hoping you'd say. It is the art of crafting a meaningful life. Please never use that phrase again, that I am selfish. There are those actions that we can do which can be selfish actions, but you are not selfish. Care for self is not selfish. And in fact, I only have one purpose in this life, just one. And that is to be my very best self. And it doesn't feel the least bit narcissistic to me.
Yeah.
That every day I'm looking at, where is this my best self?
Yeah.
Is this what I'm offering the world? Is this what I'm offering to me? My best self. I don't want to just get by. I want to be my best self. But the great news about that is the natural outgrowth of that is that then we turn outward.
Yeah.
And we want everyone to be their best selves. This isn't, it's selfish when I want to be my best self, but I want you to be scumbags. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That
makes
the
sense.
narcissist selfish person, that they want to keep it for themselves. There's nothing with desiring money and those kind of things that you can share and lift others.
Yeah.
But when you want to have more so that others have less, that's a whole different thing. The action is the same, but the heart is
The
so
intent.
different. The intent.
That totally makes sense.
And that's where I see you right now, Brighten, is that you went through and passed through these things and now began to find your way to your best self. And then what was the natural step? To turn outward.
Yeah, I think
lift
that's
others.
exactly where I'm at. And I think that's why a podcast almost just became like a natural order of things, particularly for me. And I'm not telling, all of you guys you need to start a podcast to, but I think that is what's funny. And also looking back to my childhood, I loved writing and sharing. And this is just kind of funny to tell you. When I was like 10, maybe 8 to 10, for my birthday, I asked my mom for a feather ink pen, like to write calligraphy, which is so funny because my handwriting is awful. But even just like those little moments of like, I love expressing myself through the written word or through talking. And like, why is that? Or like, what is that? And I think the things that I went through, I can either kind of just hold that inside and ask like, why me? And, and just sit in that energy. And I think I just learned early on, one, I don't want to be the one that's just always sharing that side of me, but also like when it can be a tool, when I can help people along their path, like I'm going to use that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. And I also think that's the intent behind sharing. Yeah. And I think on social media, there are some people that just share, just share everything. And if that's what you like to do, totally fine. But
I also think that it is about the intent, the motivation. Because if your intent is to showboat, that means you usually feel less than. If your intent is to get people to watch, that's because you feel less than.
Yeah.
And so when you look at, if your intent is to share, to teach and lift, then that's the right purpose. That is the purpose of being your best self. I was thinking about this. I was watching a TV show last night, and they showed all these different things that were on social media. And I sat there, I just kind of looked at the TV, and I turned to John and I said, I don't see any of that. And I realized just how really manipulated we are
Yes.
on social media.
With the algorithms.
Because they know what I look at. They track my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
They know how long I stay on something. They know how long I don't. They know that I don't want to get anything political from social media.
Yeah.
So they send me nothing.
Yeah.
I don't see anything. I'm like, where do they find all that stuff? Well, they don't find it. It's sent to them.
Yeah.
And so we just have to be so careful with what we look at social media and what we Google search.
Mm-hmm. It's all tied. It's all tied.
It's all tied. Yeah. And like John was, when we were first going together, he's looking at my feed and he's like, I don't see any of those things. I'm like, I don't doubt. He goes, what is that? The Gita from Hindu? And I'm like, okay, never mind, John. Let me just show you your feed. And so we were scrolling through it. It was all about
comparing,
sports.
Yeah. That's totally how mine and my husband is.
And
golf.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And the other day he was saying something to me about a political thing. And I said, where did you get that information? And he said, well, it was in my feed. And I go, that doesn't make it true. Mm-hmm. And I said, the fact that they're sending you that stuff means that you were reading.
Yeah.
Or stopped or paused on that thought process.
I have so many thoughts, but I'll try and consolidate them. One, did you see that billboard? It's literally in Springville about the Surgeon General's announcement about kids and social media in Utah and how they're going to go after, I don't know if they're necessarily going after the social media companies, but they're like making a formal announcement saying like, hey, kids shouldn't be on social media.
Yeah.
It's wild times for one, because it's like I was one of the first generation that really were like on social media and nobody knew. And I think now finally, people are realizing, but also I was thinking about this quote, where focus goes, energy flows. And I've thought about that recently with social media. It's completely what happens when hard things and bad things are happening all over the world. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? It keeps feeding it. And then it's like a cycle of just like, of anything. It could be a negative pop culture like story that you're looking at. It's just going to like, it's a cyclical thing. It just keeps getting even more negative. And I saw on another podcast, actually, it's called Modern Wisdom. I'm not sure if you know about that. I don't. Or not. It's a pretty big podcast, but he was saying how he, it's more like a health and wellness based podcast. And he was talking about having a content diet. And, it all ties into the same thing of like, we just need to be so careful in what we are consuming in every single way. Yeah. And the music we listen to, the food we put into our body.
And people are very aware of the food.
Yes.
But people don't think about the rest of
it. All of your senses. What about your eyes? What about your ears? Like, and I mean, okay, I'm not perfect, not at all. Like I have my own things, but it's just like, it's just the awareness. It's just the awareness. Yeah. Even if you're like, I want to, literally last night, which I thought I was going to tell you this, I am a personal trainer. I completely advocate for like healthy eating. I went to go get Wingstop and got fried wings because I've never tried it before. It's very good. But like, it's not like you can't have these things in your life, but especially with social media, because it's, and I'm going to use this word, like, because it's so addicting. I think the scrolling, like everybody has fallen into that trap. And I think I struggled with it super hardcore. It's probably why I'm talking about it so much.
Well, I just want you to think about this correlation. The advent of social media in 2010, and then it became mainstream by 2011. Yeah. How old were you?
I would have been 10, turning 11.
Yeah. Yeah. And it became mainstream in 2012 when you were 11. Mm-hmm.
Those like 2 years.
Those were your years where it just began to fall off for you. Mm-hmm. And the suicide rate in that last 10 years since the advent of social media has gone up 71%.
Yeah. I'm just, and I I find it, sometimes I get comments on my own social media accounts, which I understand this, but I just need to say this. I have posted a few videos where I'm like, hey, this is your reminder to go outside today. Like, don't watch other people live their lives on social media. Like, go live your life. And I'll put that reminder, and I want to keep doing it, actually. Like, I really want to, like, probably weekly, like, say something like that. And yet I'll get comments that are like, oh, well, this is so ironic because you're on social media. But I'm like, but that message needs to be on social media because that's where everybody is. And in terms of my podcast, I told my mom, because I have this kind of fight with myself where I'm like, oh, I talk so much about like kind of the effects of social media, and I'm on social media. Like, what is that? Yeah. And my mom
is about motivation. Yeah. It is about your reasons.
In my reasons. Yeah. And my mom's like, Brighton, I think if you know that you are trying to spread light, there are only a select few hundred, whatever, thousand people that are trying to do good in terms of like that digital space. Like, you need to be there, like if you feel called to be there and spread that light there, there's so much garbage and stuff there. Like, might as well try and share. And also podcasts, I think, are in their own category, because after I watch a podcast or listen to it, I noticed like, oh, I feel motivated. Like I am motivated to go out and do the things, or change my behavior or any of that. And I think that's like why I really do like it. And I think that's why I still share, even though it can be a big struggle, I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm also on social media, and yet I put the warnings out all the time. But I think that we can know the difference. Mm-hmm. It's an energy thing. It's people's energy behind their reasons to be on social media. And you and I both know what it's like to be on social media and do this. Yeah. And sometimes you stop and you're like, oh, that's so awesome. Oh my gosh. Like, oh, I want to follow this person. And then you click and you read the more, not just the headlines. And you read the whole thing and you're uplifted versus looking at something like, and you feel this upper lip thing going, what is that? Oh my gosh. But you keep looking. Yes. Yeah. And so I really have tried to hone in on that energy. What is the energy coming from the post? Is their intent to lift me or to keep me down because they have the need to be more than they are?
Do you want to know what's so interesting with that? I think I've noticed I will feel so strongly about where my path is, right? Like, and this is kind of like a weird visual thing I do, but in the book Mastery, he talks about how Albert Einstein talked about this inner voice, or Leonardo da Vinci talked about this star, I believe, that he follows, type of a thing. Yep. So anyways, I visualize a sun. A sun has always been a thing for me. I love that. Brighten, that whole thing. So I visualize a sun, and I think I either visualize it like growing when I'm there or shrinking, looking at things. And I promise this ties in. So... Oh, I already see where it's going, girl. So with that, this is an interesting thing. There's sometimes that I will see something cool that someone else is doing. It's not a podcast. It could be something else. Uh-huh. And I will almost abandon my own dream and my own self. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should just do this instead, type of a thing. And it's like it's a false... what is the word? Like just a false path that I know is not my path. Right. And so it's that awareness. It's like, okay, am I being inspired to be my own self? Like, is it growing? Or am I like almost abandoning myself to be someone that I'm not, to be that cool girl that's always put together or whatever, all these things that it's like deep down, I'm just completely different from this person there. Yeah. And again, I think we could maybe come into that same problem in person, but it's nothing like online, you know? You'll meet maybe one of those people in real life that you're like, oh, I just want to be exactly like them. But on social media, it's every 2 scrolls type of a thing.
If I have learned one thing in all of these years, it is this. I have yet to ever meet anyone that I really wanted to trade places with. When you know the whole story. When you know the whole story, what's behind people, yes, they may look like, oh my gosh, I wish I looked like that. Or, oh, I wish I had that kind of money. Or I wish I was that good at singing, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But when you have to take the whole package, you don't get to pick and choose from everybody around the world. I'll take that. You have to take the whole package.
I love that.
There's absolutely not been anyone that I wanted to trade places with when I saw their whole package.
Yeah.
Because I have had a lot of struggles, a lot of pain, and yet the good things have given me the strength to overcome those things. And this came full focus for me when I was in a photographer's office. And there was a family that I knew, and their picture was up on the wall. And I said, oh, aren't they the most wonderful family? I had been feeling like that. I wish my life could be like that.
Yeah.
From a picture.
Yeah.
I could just see it. They're such a loving family. Oh my gosh, and my family was hell. Okay. I want that family. And the photographer said to me, yeah, they are such a wonderful family. And when I go to take their photos, because I've taken them for years, instead of saying smile, they all say Prozac. And I was just like, what?
Oh my gosh.
And he goes, yeah, the whole family's on Prozac. And I'm like, no wonder they look so perfect. That has
so
never
funny.
been one of my issues of being addicted to a drug or to need a drug to overcome something.
That's like the perfect story to say that, though. Like, that really,
And so it was like, okay, you know what? The grass really is not greener on the other side.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And I think it comes down to you really can't trade. You are you for the rest of your life. And as much as you would like to be someone else, you're not. So might as well start watering even your body or your mind, your soul. We talked about that. Yeah, your garden, your everything to do with yourself. I think that's the only thing that you really are called to do in this life is explore / just be the best you can be with what you've got, and then just keep going.
And you discover that what you got is more than you've ever needed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Can you see why I love this girl? And I think all of you should follow her podcast. And most importantly, if you have teenagers, if you have kids that are in college, if you have young adults, really recommend her podcast to them. I find just scrolling her social media is a lift. Listening to her podcast is like jumping on an elevator to the top floor. Oh, you are just so amazing, Brighton. You can look for her links at the end of this podcast. And if I get really lucky, maybe I'll get to have her on again.
I would love that.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Love you.
All right. Until next time, keep crafting that meaningful life.
Crafting a meaningful life.